I have a deep respect for the tradesmen and craftsmen of the previous centuries. The things they accomplished with hand tools alone and the speed with which they worked is truly astounding. And I've learned a lot by examining old techniques and old tools. One of my biggest discoveries is the pattern maker gouge, sometimes known as an incannel gouge, or in some circles, a scribing gouge. Sometimes these are flat, but more often than not, you'll find them in these crank neck styles. The bevel is on the inside of the sweep, and that's why they're called incannel gouges. They come in a whole spectrum of sizes and sweeps, but due to the larger size of many of the models that pattern makers made, it's very common to find them in sizes of 1 inch and even much wider than that. And I've acquired a bunch of these incannel gouges over the years. They often can be found lumped in as part of a lot from an eBay win or an antique store. I'll be looking for a specific type of chisel, and I'll get that chisel plus 3 incannel gouges. Lately, I've been digging them out, putting them back to work, and have been really enamored with what they can do and how they can help me out of difficult situations where no other tool would work. So today, I'm going to sharpen one of these old tools and show you just a tiny bit of what the pattern maker or incannel gouge can do. But first, a little history. What the heck is a pattern maker anyway? Oftentimes, understanding what the tradesmen did will really help us to understand how to use and where to use their tools. The pattern maker is part wood carver, part wood turner, and part cabinet maker. These were tradesmen at the top echelon, extremely skilled. They're kind of the Navy SEALs or Army Rangers of the craft circuit. This would be the type of thing where hundreds of people would apply to a pattern maker's apprenticeship. Maybe 1 or 2 would be accepted. I think Christopher Schwartz said it best in one of his old blogs back when he was still working for Popular Woodworking. Pattern makers are the Jedi Knights of woodworking. Now, if you go way back, the pattern maker was really a wood carver. In the 18th century, these wood carvers would carve the negative forms of ornate moldings and ornate decorations. Imagine not just carving that festoon ornamented piece, but then carving the negative of it. So plaster can then be poured to create that decoration. It really just boggles my mind. I've seen this work done by Mac Headley at the Colonial Williamsburg Anthony Hay cabinet shop before he retired. I can't even begin to wrap my head around carving everything in negative relief. Fast forward 100 years or so into the 19th century, and these are the guys that would carve the model that would then be used to create the negative in sand, into which the molten steel, iron, adamantium, vibranium, whatever, was then poured to create whatever part they were making. Now just stop and think about that for a second. Not only did the model they carved have to be exactly precise, it had to actually be larger than the finished product. They had to take into account the shrinkage of whatever metal was being poured, because as it cools, it shrinks. So the model had to be made larger so that once it shrunk, it was the exact size that needed to be fit into something else, like an airplane engine or a turbine somewhere. We're talking about algebraic wood carving precision here. Pattern makers then took precision to a whole new level as industry soared, literally. Companies like Boeing and McDonnell Douglas took us to the skies, and the pattern makers were behind all the parts into that aircraft. Now think about that. The level of precision required for the parts in an airplane. But also think about the fact that this job largely went unappreciated. These guys, their work was never seen by the general public. They were just an inside job, part of the assembly line that produced that finished product. In short, I'm not worthy of the level of mastery that a pattern maker brings to bear. But knowing that what they did, we have an idea how their tools might be used. They were doing very precise work. They needed to have unfettered access to their model. That's why oftentimes the handles are cranked out of the way and the gouge was curved with the bevel on the inside so that the flat back could ride against an existing model, referencing off existing faces to create whatever shapes or sizes or whatever was needed to create that model. In other words, the pattern gouge is really a highly flexible tool that can be used to create any kind of shape, just by selecting the right sweep, the right width, and the right type of handle. But enough of the history. This is a woodworking show, so let's get to sharpening this thing. I recommend you start with a wider, shallow sweep pattern gouge. Not only are these easier to sharpen, but they're also easier to learn to use, and you'll find very flexible on a variety of tasks. Now, we sharpen these just like we would sharpen any chisel. We flatten the back, set the bevel, and then hone the whole thing till you can split an atom. But the curved nature and inside bevel does complicate things a bit. First, I'll flatten the back. The whole thing doesn't need to be flat, but perhaps 1 inch back from the edge will do. In this case, I move it side to side on a diamond stone and embrace the rock of the blade, covering the back from edge to edge. The long blade in the crank neck really helps with this. You can just twist your wrist a little to rock that blade back and forth. I'll work up from my extra coarse stone to a fine stone to polish the back. Now I'll grind the bevel. Often you'll find a back bevel on one of these from a previous owner. The less I say about that, the better, but let's just say I hate back bevels. To remove it, the best thing to do is just grind the edge back at 90 degrees past that back bevel. You can work the edge square across or even put a slight convex curve into the edge to get more of a slicing cut. I prefer that slicing cut, so I'm going to go with a convex curve. Now I can set the bevel, but you'll see the problem here. Concave tool, flat wheel. So I grab my dressing tool and shape the wheel itself into a rounded profile. I have an extra wheel specifically for this purpose. I also have some 1/4 inch wide wheels that I use for even tighter sweep gouges and things like molding plane irons. With the wheel rounded, I can work on the bevel. These are paring tools, so low angle will help them slice through the wood better. I like 20 to 25 degrees. Now the longer blade and handle can get in the way here. I moved my grinder to the edge of the bench so I could hang the handle off the edge, but I found the cantilevered weight of that long blade and handle difficult to manage. So instead, I took a tip from turning gouges and set up my ghetto fabulous Wolverine jig with a scrap block and a clamp. Now I can butt the handle up against the block and skip the tool rest entirely and give myself a consistent bevel angle. Grind until you have the whole bevel set, and make sure to keep checking on the steel and quench it if necessary, just so it doesn't get too hot. Now I need to hone this edge. And here, I much prefer to take the stone to the tool. And I'll use slip stones. And just rotating my wrist a little to present the curve into that incannel, I'll push up and cover the entire edge. This method really allows you to see where you're working the steel, where you're bringing up a polish. I can literally just sight right down the bevel angle to set my stone and match what I just ground. Now, if you don't have a slip stone, you could wrap some sandpaper around a dowel or even a paint can in the case of a shallow sweep like this. Now, once you pull up a nice wire edge, you can go back to the diamond stone, and on your highest grit, just wipe that burr off. Finally, I go to the leather strop. And here's why I like having a leather strop that's not attached to a board, because I can bend this and get into that recess. And I can do the same thing where I take the tool, hold it up in the air and be able to sight down. Or if you prefer, you can set it down on the bench and you can grab like a narrower board, just kind of wrap it over that board, and you can create a convex strop to bring that edge up to its final polish. When I feel a burr, I come back and wipe it off the back, just like I did on the stones. That edge is razor sharp. And that's all there is to it to get one of these sharpened ready for work. It may take a little bit of practice to get the body mechanics right because that whole operation is freehand, but I think you'll discover that it's a lot easier than you may think it is. Give it a try, and if you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to help out. Now let me briefly show you just a few of the uses I found for this tool just to get you started with it. Anytime you peg something or drawbar something, you've got to trim this flush. You can just come in with a regular bench chisel and do this. I like to do it bevel down and kind of lever up. But I found that these pattern maker gouges are fantastic for this, especially these wide ones, because I can rock it from side to side, and because I've ground the edge to be a bit of a curve, it does a great slicing action and keeps the corners out of the wood, so I'm not scarring anything. And it will cut right across very cleanly. Nice and flush. With this cranked handle and the long blade, I've got great leverage. And my hand and knuckles are kind of kept completely out of the way. That's paired flush. I haven't damaged any of the surrounding area or worried about tearing anything around it. Since the pattern maker gouge is really a carving tool with the cabinet maker's paring edge on it, I can use this long edge to reference off this long molding edge, and I can come in and carve in this cross grain section here. And with it referenced here, I can get a perfect match. In other words, this is my pattern, and I use the pattern maker's gouge to match that pattern. You can see with this wide, very shallow sweep, I can really get very close to my final shape without a whole bunch of facets and things. And of course, they come in a bunch of different sizes, so of course you can always come in into tighter areas and just keep on shaping. I actually prefer this one because it's got the curved edge on it. This is straight across, so I'm actually getting a cleaner slicing cut with this edge the way it is. And if you keep it sharp, doesn't matter whether we're working cross grain, in grain, whatever. You can just dial in that shape. Another instance is anytime you've got to work in the center of a larger panel. Say I needed to cut a large recess in here, maybe it was inlaying a pâte array or something like that. The curved action of these gouges, especially when you carve or grind a convex shape to it, allows you to get in there and carve and relieve large parts from the middle of the board. The incannel and the sweep and everything makes it act a lot like a smoothing plane. So it will come in here and remove wood, large hunks of wood, relatively cleanly while keeping the corners out of it and causing it to splinter. Another instance is where maybe you've got a dado across a wide panel like this. I can grab a different gouge. This is just a narrow one with a little bit more radical sweep to it. And I can come in with the crank neck and I can work in the interior of this. And again, because of that gouge shape, I can remove a lot of wood relatively quickly, and I don't have to worry about the corners digging in. Or I can even twist my wrist a little, and I get this cool slicing action that allows me to work right up against an edge. You can do the same thing with a regular cranked neck flat chisel like this, but I find that the curved action here just works so much more efficiently, just like a scrub or a foreplane with a radically cambered iron. Of course, these are gouges, so anytime you're dealing with a carved or sculptural element where you've got to get access into a lot of weird areas, these can come in real handy for refining large curved surfaces, like coming in and shaping the knee transition on this cabriole leg. In a lot of ways, this can be like a spoke shave without the restrictions of a sole getting in the way and preventing you from dealing with really tight curves. And the real key is for furniture work, with this long flat back, you can see it works like a carving gouge, but it's also crossed with a long paring chisel. So they embody that perfect hybrid between wood carving gouge and cabinet maker tool. That really is exactly what the pattern maker is all about. Now, I'm barely scratching the surface of what these can do here. And mostly that's because these tools are still relatively new to me. But just getting them sharp and ready to go has been the biggest bonus. Having them on deck means that I reach for them more often, and every time I pick one of them up, I discover another handy use for it. So now that I brought these guys to your attention, you're gonna start to see them popping up everywhere. Antique stores, eBay, old tool dealers. So pick up a few of them, get them sharp, and start your own discovery. And let me know what tasks you unlock along the way.